Ladies and gentlemen, there was a time when you could have spoken, a time when you could have shouted from the rooftops, exposed the lies, torn the veil off their deception. But you didn't. You chose silence, not because you were weak, but because you understood something profound. Reality has a way of setting itself straight. You see, betrayal is not a single act, it's a pattern. It's a system of cracks that the betrayer desperately tries to fill with more lies, more manipulation, more control. And for a while it works. They thrive in the shadows, convinced that their deception will never be unearthed. But the thing about lies is that they don't hold weight. They float for a while, but they lack the density to stand against time. And when they finally come crashing down, they don't do so with a whisper, they do so with an earth-shattering roar. Their world is falling apart now. And it's not because you spoke. It's because they built their house on a foundation of sand. You didn't have to say a word. Reality did it for you. The weight of their own choices, the burden of their own deception has become unbearable. And now, as they scream, as they scramble to hold together the fragments of their collapsing world, they reveal what they've been hiding all along. This is not about vengeance. This is about inevitability. You knew that truth does not need to be forced. It only needs time. And now, as the echoes of their own destruction grow louder, the world sees what you saw all along. You stayed silent. But now, their betrayal speaks louder than you ever could. Silence is a choice with consequences. Silence is never neutral. It is an active decision, a path chosen either out of fear, wisdom, or indifference. When confronted with deception, manipulation, and betrayal, staying silent may feel like the safest option. Perhaps you feared the fallout of speaking the truth. Maybe you thought it wasn't your battle to fight. Or you understood something deeper. Some truths do not need to be shouted from the rooftops. They simply need time to unravel. But understand this: silence does not erase consequences. It does not negate responsibility. Silence is not an escape. It is merely a delay. When you choose to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing, you are not absolving yourself of the situation. Instead, you are making a trade. You are trading immediate confrontation for future reckoning. The world operates on a simple but unforgiving principle. Reality always asserts itself. The truth does not vanish because you refuse to acknowledge it. It does not dissolve because it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. It lingers, waiting, building pressure beneath the surface. Consider this: when someone constructs their life on deception, when they manipulate, betray, and distort reality, they are creating an unstable structure. They can reinforce it with more lies, cover it with charm, or intimidate those who see through it. But no amount of effort can change the fact that it is a fragile, unsustainable illusion, and illusions, by nature, do not last. When you stay silent, you do not change the trajectory of their deception. You merely allow it to unfold on its own terms. This is where many misunderstand the power of silence. It is not weakness. It is not passivity. In some cases, it is the ultimate act of strategic patience. History has proven time and again that the most dangerous lies are not those exposed immediately, but those left to rot from within. Those who weave deception are not escaping judgment. They are merely borrowing time. And when the moment of reckoning arrives, it is not a slow, quiet realization. It is a catastrophic collapse. And when it happens, the silence that once protected them will be shattered by the deafening sound of their world crumbling. Silence does not erase truth. It does not absolve wrongdoing. It does not provide immunity from consequence. It is simply a space, a waiting period between the lie and its inevitable exposure. And this is why your silence was not an act of surrender, but an act of patience. You did not need to drag their betrayal into the light. It would always find its way there. The difference is that when it finally emerged, it was undeniable, uncontrollable, and utterly devastating. The consequences of silence are not always immediate, but they are always inevitable. You did not have to be the executioner. They were holding the blade all along. Betrayal is a time bomb. Betrayal is never just a single act. It is a series of choices, small at first, but accumulating into something explosive. When someone betrays trust, they are not merely committing one wrong, they are planting a ticking time bomb beneath their own foundation. They may not hear it, they may not feel the vibrations beneath their feet, but make no mistake, every deception, every manipulation, every broken promise is another second ticking away. The betrayer often believes they are in control. They convince themselves that they are smarter than those they deceive, that they can balance the weight of their dishonesty without consequence. For a while, they may even seem to be winning. They walk confidently, untouched by accountability, reinforcing their illusions with more lies, more excuses, and more victims. But here's the fundamental truth. No one escapes the consequences of betrayal indefinitely. Every lie demands another. Every act of deception requires additional effort to conceal. Over time, the burden of maintaining this false world grows heavier. The betrayer, in their arrogance, believes they can sustain it. But they fail to recognize that the greatest threat to their world is not you, not those they have wronged, but themselves. A betrayal left unchecked is not a resolved betrayal. It is a delayed disaster. Like a time bomb buried beneath the surface, it may remain unseen for a while, but the countdown never stops. And when it reaches zero, the explosion is not quiet. It is devastating, chaotic, and beyond control. Some betrayals collapse quietly, like a bridge weakened by years of neglect. Others collapse spectacularly, like a dam breaking all at once, flooding everything in its wake. But all betrayals collapse. That is the inescapable truth. This is where patience becomes your ally. When you are betrayed, your instinct may be to fight back, to expose, to retaliate. But there is an alternative. Let the weight of their own choices catch up to them. You don't have to ignite the explosion. They've already built the bomb. You don't have to accelerate the destruction. Their own actions are the catalyst. And when it happens, when their carefully crafted world comes crashing down, it will not do so with a whisper. It will be loud, it will be public, and it will be undeniable. The very lies they used to control others will turn against them. The very deception they thought would secure their future will be the thing that erases it. They will scramble to contain the damage, to silence the fallout, to rewrite the past, but it will be too late. You stayed silent, not out of weakness, not out of fear, but because you understood something they never did. Truth does not need to be forced. It only needs time. And now their betrayal is no longer a secret. It is an eruption, a collapse, a reckoning. And the world is finally hearing, not because you shouted, but because their destruction is too loud to ignore. The cost of integrity versus the cost of cowardice. Every decision we make carries a cost. To stand for the truth is to invite resistance, to endure scrutiny, and to risk isolation. Integrity is expensive. It demands sacrifice. It asks that you carry burdens that others would rather ignore. It requires that you confront lies, endure discomfort, and accept the consequences of standing firm in a world that often rewards deceit. But as costly as integrity is, cowardice is far more expensive. Many believe that avoiding conflict, staying silent, or looking the other way will spare them hardship. They convince themselves that neutrality is safety, that refusing to take a stand will protect them from the chaos of truth and consequence. But this is an illusion. The cost of cowardice is not immediate, but it is relentless. It does not strike like a hammer, it corrodes like rust, slowly, methodically, until the entire structure collapses. When people betray others, when they deceive, manipulate, or abandon their principles in pursuit of comfort or power, they believe they are escaping consequence. They believe they have outmaneuvered morality, that they have secured a future free of accountability. And for a time, it may seem true, but the laws of reality do not bend for convenience. They do not accommodate the selfish. And while a person may avoid the immediate cost of honesty, they are incurring a debt that reality will eventually collect. With interest, the cost of cowardice is regret. It is the slow erosion of self-respect. It is the knowledge buried deep within that one has chosen the easy path at the expense of what is right. The betrayer may not acknowledge it at first. They may drown it out with distractions, power, or fleeting success. But the weight of their choices accumulates, pressing down on them like a burden they cannot shake. And when the reckoning comes, it is not just external, it is internal. It is the slow realization that no matter how much they have gained, they have lost something far greater, their own soul. You, on the other hand, chose integrity. And yes, you paid a price for it. Maybe you lost friends. Maybe you endured loneliness. Maybe you suffered because you refused to betray yourself. But now, as their world collapses, as their deception implodes under the weight of its own falsehoods, you see the difference. Your cost was temporary, theirs is permanent. They sacrificed truth for comfort, and now both are gone. They avoided short-term pain only to be consumed by long-term destruction. They betrayed others, and now they have been betrayed by the very reality they sought to manipulate. You never needed to fight them. You never needed revenge. You only needed to stand firm, to endure, and to let the truth do what it always does, right. Because in the end, the price of integrity is hardship, but the price of cowardice is ruin. Reality always strikes back. Reality is not something that can be bent indefinitely. It can be distorted for a time, manipulated in the short term, but it never truly changes to accommodate lies. You can ignore gravity, but step off a cliff, and it will remind you that it was always there. You can deny the truth, but the moment will come when it forces itself into view, whether you are ready or not. This is the mistake of the betrayer. They believe that deception is power, that if they can manipulate perception, control the narrative, and silence opposition, they can reshape reality itself. For a time, it appears as though they have succeeded. They surround themselves with people who validate their version of events. They convince others that they are untouchable, and they weave a web of lies strong enough to deceive even themselves. But reality does not care about perception. It does not ask for permission to be true. It does not negotiate with illusion. And no matter how tightly someone tries to hold it back, it always strikes back. You see, when people betray others, when they build their world on dishonesty and manipulation, they are not truly winning. They are only delaying the moment when reality comes crashing through the door. Every falsehood is a wall erected against the truth, but no wall stands forever. The greater the lie, the more energy it takes to maintain. The more people involved, the harder it becomes to keep them aligned. The more deception is piled on, the weaker the foundation grows. And then, one day, the weight is too much. The structure collapses. And it doesn't do so in silence. It shatters with undeniable force, revealing everything that was hidden beneath. This is why you never had to rush, never had to force the truth to emerge. The reckoning was always built into the betrayal itself. You understood that a world built on lies is a world on borrowed time. That when someone fights reality, they are not avoiding defeat, they are merely postponing the inevitable. The betrayer never believes the collapse will happen to them. They believe they are different, that they are smarter, that they will be the one exception, but they are not. No one is. And when their moment comes, when the truth they tried so desperately to bury rises up and overtakes them, it is not just a lesson, it is a reckoning. The louder they boasted, the more painful their fall. The higher they climbed on deception, the greater their descent into ruin. The more they silenced others, the more deafening their own downfall becomes. You did not have to be the one to bring them down. You only had to wait. Because reality always strikes back. And when it does not whisper, it roars. Justice has its own rhythm. Justice is not always immediate, but it is always inevitable. The impatient demand it now, the vengeful seek to force it, but those who understand reality know that true justice operates on its own timeline. It does not rush. It does not need to. It is not dependent on emotion, nor does it require an audience. It unfolds naturally, like a storm brewing in the distance. Silent at first, then relentless when it arrives. The betrayer, the deceiver, the manipulator, they believe they have escaped justice. They mistake the absence of immediate consequences for permanent immunity. They assume that because their wrongdoing was not met with instant destruction, they have won. This is their greatest miscalculation. You see, justice is not an event, it is a process. A slow, methodical unraveling of falsehoods. The web of lies they wove so carefully begins to fray, not because someone pulls at it, but because it was never sustainable in the first place. The people they deceived start to question. The narrative they crafted starts to contradict itself. The walls they built to keep the truth out start to crack, piece by piece. And then suddenly it happens. The betrayal they thought was buried resurfaces. The lies they told begin to entangle them. The relationships they built on manipulation collapse under their own weight. The power they once wielded vanishes, and in its place remains only the wreckage of their own making. This is the rhythm of justice. It does not always strike when expected, but it strikes with precision. And when it does not require your effort, your intervention, or your revenge. You did not need to force their downfall. You did not need to scream for retribution. You only needed patience. Because the truth does not decay. It does not weaken over time. It waits unwavering until it is undeniable. And when it finally emerges, it does so with the full weight of everything that was hidden. The world now sees what you saw all along. The ones who doubted you, who dismissed your silence as weakness, who sided with deception because it was convenient, they now watch as the betrayer's world shatters. Loudly, publicly, inescapably. This is why you remain silent, not out of fear, not out of helplessness, but out of understanding. Because you knew that true justice does not need to be rushed, it only needs time. And now, as their own betrayal turns against them, as the consequences they once evaded consume them, the world hears the sound of their downfall. Let it be loud, let it be undeniable, because justice, when it finally arrives, speaks for itself.